Hi, everybody. My name is Arra Rael, she, her pronouns.
I'm Cathy Assata, she, her pronouns, and we are going to be talking about boosting the signal for community resilience.
Thank you so much for joining us. We genuinely appreciate it.
Now, before we can move forward to talk about boosting the signal, we need to move backwards just a little bit to set the stage. So, a couple months ago, I was on vacation in Montana visiting Glacier National Park. If you've never been, suggest you go. It is absolutely beautiful. And I was on a boat tour of St. Mary Lake on the eastern side of the park. And I noticed something a little bit different about some of the trees in the park. And they were all kind of bent to the right-hand side, and their branches and leaves were kind of clustered mostly on the right-hand side. And I was a little curious about that, and I asked the tour guide, what is this about? And apparently this was all about survival. So what happens is, because of the near constant westerly winds and snow and rain and harsh conditions, the trees have learned to adapt by kind of putting all of their resources on the leeward side of their limbs. So everything grows on that side, and they've learned how to grow with the wind instead of against the wind. In other words, nature found a way to survive. As humans, we also experience sometimes harsh conditions, sometimes stressful conditions growing up. And we call those adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs.
Right. So these trees have adapted and developed protective factors that are essential for their survival. And as humans, we do the same. It's our superpower. We have relational, environmental, and social factors that help us adapt in even the harshest of conditions, called positive and compensatory experiences, or PACEs for short. Now today, we're going to be sharing some ways in which we can collectively boost our PACEs as individuals and as a community.
But before we can get too far into PACEs, we need to talk a little bit about some examples of ACEs. Again, ACEs can be common stressful events that can happen before a person turns 18 that cause harm and can impact brain development. Studies have shown that there is a direct link between the number of ACEs that a person has and their health and well-being.
Now, some examples of ACEs include divorce, food insecurity, or different types of abuse. Now, however, that definition has expanded in recent years, and now they take into consideration someone's cultural identity, their family history, and certain environmental factors, such as intergenerational poverty, cultural discrimination, or lack of access to educational opportunities. Now, as Cathy and I continue to explore these concepts, what we realized is, while we may have gone through similar ACEs, the way that we navigated through them and the impact that they left on our on our well-being on the long term were vastly different.
For example, both of us experienced a time in our early childhood or childhood where our families were completely displaced. When I was 14, summer before 9th grade year, which is a pretty pivotal moment, my family was displaced due to a house fire. Now, 7 of us and a dog got out of the house unharmed, which was a good thing. We were privileged enough, we were able to rebuild, we were able to have housing in the meantime. But we did lose everything in that house fire. It was a terrifying situation. It was middle of the night. It was scary. It was something that was very confusing. There was a lot of hurt. There was a lot of anger. There was a lot of resentment during that time. And of course, 9th grade year, there was also a lot of other kind of confusing factors going on.
Now, for me, when I was 3 years old, my family was displaced due to a natural disaster. I was pretty young, so I don't remember a lot of details. I do remember feeling incredibly confused. I remember feeling very, very lost. And I have one distinct memory from that time, and that is of my mom carrying me running through the crowd. Now, We share these experiences with you to let you know that ACEs are common. More than likely, most of us will experience at least one in our lifetime. And a major contributing factor that helps us recover from those adverse experiences are those protective and compensatory experiences that follow afterwards.
So as we mentioned before, as humans, we all have a superpower. And unfortunately, it's not one of the really fun ones like teleportation or invisibility that we meet, but it is the ability to adapt. Our brains have this desire to survive and to heal. They are these amazingly elastic organs that will change to adapt to our environment. As kids, we develop these protective factors. We have these protective factors like best friends, or if we have a place where we belong, or an adult that we can trust, right? Those protective factors can help prevent the damage that can be caused by the stressful events, by the adverse childhood experiences. Kind of like a safety bubble, right, if you will. So they create this safety bubble. So these protective factors, these safety bubbles, can mitigate the risk of mental health issues or self-harm, suicide, substance use, chronic illness, heart disease, chronic pain. The list kind of goes on and on and on. The more protective factors or compensatory factors that a person has during that development time is they're learning how to create and develop love and trust and safety.
Right. These factors can also help us build healthy habits around emotional regularity, resiliency, belonging, how to support and care for ourselves and for others. And it's also really important to keep in mind that while experiencing those paces as a child or a youth can help mitigate the impact of those ACEs, you can actually continue building upon them throughout your lifetime. It's not a limited time use.
So, as we kind of mentioned before, we've had our similar experiences. Arra and I have done work researching and exploring how PACEs can mitigate the effect of ACEs, starting with our own stories, right? Looking at our individual identities and experiences and how we view things, and taking a look at how our individual protective factors has had an impact on our adult lives and our health and well-being. So considering our adverse childhood experiences, our similar experiences growing up, and taking into account then our own protective factors, we took a look at what were some of the differences. Coming from a place of privilege and recognizing that as a middle class, white, cisgender female from a two-parent, at that time, home, those were protective factors for me. Recognizing that, yes, I had friends, I had best friends, I was involved in choir, I was involved in support in youth groups, I had a very supportive father. Those were factors that created some amount of protection. Right? There's key to choir. But here's the thing, is I didn't quite fit in. There's a part cut off there with a cigarette in my hand because appropriate, right? I didn't quite fit in. I didn't feel like I belonged. There were other adverse experiences happening during this time. My parents' upcoming divorce, abuse, bullying, identity confusion, right? My role, my behaviors, how I acted, everything would change depending on who I was with at the time. There was a lot of hurt, there was a lot of confusion, there was a lot of anger. I didn't know who I was, I didn't know what I believed in, and that led to some unhealthy behaviors. That was my way of coping. That was my way of escaping for quite some time. I didn't have a safety bubble.
Right. Now, while Cathy and I continue to explore these concepts, we realize that one important factor that contributes to the effectiveness of PACEs is community. The more encouraging, involved, and consistent a child or youth community is, the more likely they're able to develop those positive and compensatory experiences, but more than that, they're able to maintain them. Now, some of the PACEs that I had growing up, they included access to a high-quality education and the stability that the military lifestyle afforded my family, which we had access to because my dad served in the Navy for 24 years. Now, in addition, I also had a plethora of extracurricular activities that were available to me while I was growing up. I joined the Venture Scouts. That's a picture of my older sister and myself during a snowboarding trip with them. I routinely volunteered and engaged with my church youth group. It was something that I had growing up, and it still contributes to my faith today. And I also had a plethora of after-school activities that were available for me that I could access whenever I really needed to. However, the most enduring PACE that I have ever experienced in my life was the unconditional love and acceptance from my family that I receive and continue to receive today. First, from my parents, and then my siblings, and it eventually led me to my wonderful wife. Now, I need to make it very clear. This does not mean I have not suffered. This does not mean I have not faced discrimination or hardships or felt as if I belonged in every single space, because that's not true. However, what it did mean was that I had a safety bubble of trusted people that I could lean on and who could help me navigate through those difficult moments.
So we're here today with an invitation, a call to action, if you will. We are both passionate about certain things that we do, this being one of them. We work at Center for Human Services, which is a nonprofit behavioral health organization here in the community. We provide counseling, family support, education. We work to build and strengthen our community. We work to develop protective factors, one family at a time. And we believe strongly in our mission. We believe strongly in what we do. But we know that we can't do it alone. And we know that we can do so much better with a little bit of help. So we're here to invite you to join us with 4 simple activities, 4 simple things that we can get involved in to help us increase the protective factors, those PACEs within our communities that can help strengthen what is around us, strengthen the protective and compensatory factors in our communities. Maybe one family at a time, maybe more than one family at a time. What can we do for those that are around us? What can we do to boost the signal in our communities?
Now, one of the simplest and most effective ways that we can actually collectively boost our PACEs is by getting civically involved and volunteering. Volunteering helps all parties. It helps us develop a sense of purpose and a sense of belonging, while simultaneously increasing our social and support networks. Now, another simple thing that we can all do, we can do this today, that can actually help collectively boost those PACEs, is by becoming a trusted adult for the children and youth in our lives. Now, a trusted adult is someone who is a part of a child or youth extended network. They can act as important role models, and they can also help support mental and emotional health for that child or youth. Now, if you think back to those PACEs that I shared earlier, right? I contribute a majority of them to the fact that the adults in my community chose to engage in these two practices. It was only for a few hours a month, right? However, the impact that they left on my life and the lives of others was immeasurable, and I do continue to benefit from them today, 20 odd years later.
Another thing that we can do, starting today, in our daily lives, is approach each other with compassion and curiosity. And remember that PACES is not limited to youth and children. As adults, we continue to develop these protective factors. Most of my protective factors have been developed as an adult. But that's another talk. But we continue to develop these as adults. And by looking with compassion and with curiosity, by changing our approach from what's wrong with you to what happened to you, what we end up doing is looking at the human behind the behavior, the human who is worthy of love and support and belonging, and we end up creating that connection. And it's something pretty amazing happens when we, again, look with curiosity as instead of that judgment and blaming. Another thing that we can do is something I'm hoping that we can do more, again, in our daily lives and in our active lives, is reach out and ask for help when we need to. Take care of ourselves, right? Especially as adults, right? Sometimes we leave taking care of ourselves to the very last. We become the afterthought. And when we can start taking care of ourselves and showing the youth that we matter too, and that we can take care of ourselves and ask for help, that we're not invincible, we're showing them that it's okay. We're also helping to reduce that stigma, especially when it comes to reaching out for mental health help, right? We're reducing the stigma when it comes to asking for help for things like depression and anxiety. When we can show that it's okay to not be okay all the time. It's okay to ask for help. We're role modeling what that looks like and breaking that stigma down just a little bit more.
All right, so how about we take a look at those trees from Montana again, one more time, right? And you notice how they're all kind of out there fighting for survival alone. We couldn't help but wonder, what if instead those trees were grouped together? What if instead of facing those harsh elements by themselves, they instead had a community that could shield them from those harsh elements? Would they grow more tall? Could they potentially be more lush? Could they potentially look like those other trees around St. Mary Lake? Now, the thing with these trees is they have adapted to survive. We all do, right? But as humans, we can do even better. We can reach out, and we can boost the signal to the rest of our community and build belonging together. Thank you so much for coming to our TED Talk.